welcome to the Art of Being Human. Today we're going to start the elderly age period, what that's like. And I'm going to speak from my own perspective, of course, as an 80-year-old. But there is information I'm going to give you as to what happens in elderly age so that to prepare you for when it happens. So at any rate, when do you know that you're elderly? You know, if you look at a textbook, it's probably going to tell you age 65 on up. That's basically retirement age. Although maybe now textbooks are saying 70 on up. At any rate, let's say it's 65 for the sake of argument. So now you've reached age 65. What is life like? Probably not much better, not much better and not much worse than it was a few weeks before. There's no fine demarcation between when you go past from adulthood into elderly. I mean, life just goes on. It's like the new year. Is the new year better than the old? It's probably pretty much the same, but a year has passed. As you get older and older, things do happen to you. I did not realize I was elderly until I was told. The first time I realized that people viewed me as being elderly, because I never looked at myself that way, was when I went into some kind of a fast food chain and they asked me if I wanted the senior discount. I couldn't believe it. Somebody asked me if I wanted the senior discount. I says, me? Senior? I mean, I was with a friend of mine at the time, and then I apologized. I'd just never been told that before. I'd never been asked about it. But the recognition of my being older really came true, and I'm going to tell you the story about myself. It's kind of funny in a way, but this happened not too long ago. And it happened in the city, so I'm not going to mention the name of the store I was in, but I was in a store. 2 or 3 people, I was at the checkout counter. There were 2 or 3 people ahead of me, nobody behind me, and a sales girl came along and said, gee, could you help me do such and so? She was talking to the other sales girl who was using the cash register. And the lady at the cash register said, yeah, I'll help you, but not until I finish with this old lady. And she was referring to me. I have to finish with this old lady first. And I was offended, and I said, who are you calling old? And right away, everybody around just tensed right up. They expected me to give her a tongue lashing, and I wasn't that angry, but I was a little offended by the fact that she used old lady. I never considered myself old. And so I said, everybody froze. And I said, you know, I may be elderly in years, but I'm young at heart. And then everybody relaxed, and they even started to applaud, and they said, oh, that's the way to go. And then I just wanted to make a point clear to her, because she didn't understand. I said, you know, I'm a television producer. That always sounds impressive. I also have a weekly radio show. And I went on and on with some of the things I was doing, and she felt totally, totally embarrassed. But I wasn't angry at her. I just wanted her to realize that being old, there's a certain a way of looking at age where you get discriminated against if you're older. So when she said, I'll help you, but not until I finish with this old lady, I mean, her, I think, impressions of elderly age might be inconsistent with what the realities are. So I talked with her, and the only thing she could say was, I got to learn to keep my mouth shut. And she said it 2 or 3 times. Meanwhile, everybody around me was talking with me. Oh, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you like this and that and the other? And I was having a great old time talking to everybody while she was still saying, I need to keep my mouth shut. So it's a case of how you view age, I guess, but I never really looked at myself as being old. I certainly have the lifestyle of a much younger person, but my age is my age, and I have to accept that. So when are you old? Well, there's some difference of opinion. I think maybe it's your attitude. When you decide you no longer want to work and you want to do something in just hobbies and so forth, but there's no clear-cut age at which you are old, and I've often said 80 is the new 60. and it may well be. Now, some have chronic illnesses, and they're older by the time they're 20 because they can't work anymore because of their chronic illnesses. So they're kind of not active in society. Others have chronic illnesses, but they're still active at 90. I know of a couple of people that got their licenses renewed. They were 101, and they love to drive, and they can do it. They're physically able to do it. So it's age is partly what your attitude is toward life, and part of it is age itself. So what I'm going to do now, the human body, well, let me make some comments first. The human body does change. You have to realize that you do slow down. And I'm going to make some comments about older age from the perspective of an 80-year-old, because that's what I am. And I'm going to include some people's poetry as they write poetry. Remember that the creative process doesn't stop. Some people's best work is when they're in their 80s and their 90s. Some people's best paintings come when they're older. You know, and a lot of people dread getting old, but I don't dread getting old. I'm just happy I made it this far, and hopefully I'll make it further. So I'm going to read something from the internet, then I'm going to read some poetry about old age, or either written by old age people, but this is what I got from the internet. Don't get all weird about getting older. Our age is merely the number of years that the world has been enjoying us, and that we have helped other people. Now, I'm going to read a poem about turning 80, since I am, and I think it's a nice little poem, so I'm going to read it, and it's not too long, but it's interesting, and it's about a person who has turned 80 but wants to live a lot longer. And this is what the poem says. I don't know who wrote it, so I can't give proper credit, but I would like to, because it's an interesting poem. This is what it says. Today, dear Lord, I'm 80, and there's much I haven't done. I hope, dear Lord, you'll let me live until I'm 81. But then, if I haven't finished all I want to do, would you let me stay a while until I'm 82? So many places I want to go, so much I want to see. Do you think you could manage to make it 83? The world is changing very fast. There is so much in store. I'd like it very much to live until I'm 84. And if by then I'm still alive, I'd like to still stay till 85. More planes will be up in the air, so I'd really like to stick and see what happens to the world when I'm 86. I know, dear Lord, it's much to ask, and it must be nice in heaven, but I would actually like to stay until I'm 87. I know by then I won't be fast and sometimes will be late, but it would be so pleasant to be around at 88. I will have seen so many things and had a wonderful time, so I'm sure that I'd be willing to leave by 89, maybe. And so that's the whole poem. Now, I want to read the poetry of an 82-year-old. I was a college professor, and I was teaching college in my 30s. And I had published a book which got good reviews. I got a number of honors for writing the book, and part of the book was used for advertising copy by A.B. Dick. I got an A.B. Dick Creative Teaching Award, and some things about me were written up in Saturday Review and Today's Education, and I got invitations to go overseas and do seminars and all kinds of things. Well, this particular man, who was 82 at the time, so he's like about 50 years older than I was, saw what was published in Saturday Review about me, and he decided to write me. And so I want to do some, he's a poet, was a poet, he's passed now. I want to read some of his poetry, but this is what he wrote me to introduce himself to me, and this is what he says. I am 82 years old, and in the past 15 years have written a lot of letters to VIPs of different cultures and backgrounds. I have read about you in the August 15th Saturday Review and was fascinated by your smiling picture contained therein. I'm wondering, is your smile real or is it an illusion? It's so hard to tell. Now, the reason he said that is the book that I published was on visual illusions and perception. It had a lot of my own artwork in it. And so, therefore, he was making reference to it, kind of like in a laughing kind of way. And so I shortened that. The letter was longer. I shortened it some. So he wrote this poem. And the different ways of viewing things I really find confusing. And how you judge my poetry, I think, would be amusing. Since you are very young, it seems, and I am 82, I probably wouldn't look at things exactly just like you. Well, he writes in rhyme, and actually it's pretty good. So let me go on. This is his poetry, and sometimes it's very reflective of his life, what he thinks about his life. He was married at the time. And I guess his wife was about the same age as he. We struck up a friendship after he wrote me, because I contacted him. And we struck up a friendship. I never met him personally, but we had a friendship through letters and so forth. So he wrote a book of poems, and he called it Oh No. And I want to mention his name because I want to give credit. His name was George Burrow. And as I say, he's not alive now. He's 50. I'm in my 80s, and he was 50 years older than I was, so I can't imagine he'd still be alive. But this is some of his poetry as an 82-year-old. This poem is called Spare Parts. I need a brand new heart, my Lord, not of synthetic make, but one which stands the test of time, one that won't crack or break. Steady and strong 'twill beat, my Lord, eternal love its food. Wisdom will pulsate through my veins and fill my soul with good. I need a brand new brain, my Lord, made not by human hand, but one to help us solve our ills, our problems, understand. I need a deeper purpose, Lord, a high, unselfish goal. Perhaps instead of human parts, I need a brand new soul. So he's very reflective about his life. Now, I want to read a poem. He titles it Apology, and it's on marrying his wife and reflecting upon how good a husband he was and this kind of thing. This is how it goes. Excuse me, wifey, I forget the place and time when we first met, and you'll not blame me, this I know, as that was 60 years ago. I was a high school senior then. I think you were a freshman when I first judged with appraising eyes your height. I thought, not quite my size. Despite these things we thought were wrong about each other, all along we felt that someday we would wed, though nothing at the time was said. Once more forgive me, for you see, I just forget if you or me it was who popped the question. I really think 'twas your suggestion. At times the road has been quite rough. At times I wasn't kind enough. I got you, don't remember how, and I am glad I have you now. So he has a marriage that he's happy with, but he reflects upon his life and what happened, and at 82 years old, he may not remember it all, but he writes very well for an 82-year-old. And I shouldn't even say that, because a lot of creativity occurs in elderly age. In elderly age, you may forget some facts here and there, but your creative process goes on, and sometimes people's greatest paintings and greatest writings occur in elderly age. Now, he wrote a poem called Who is Alone? And he is relating, I need to set this up for you. He's relating the turnstiles. You know, if you go to New York City and you have to catch a bus or a trolley or something, you go through these turnstiles. He's relating these turnstiles as if they're ammunition or guns firing, and he's relating people being so crowded in together like they're like in cages, and then they finally get free, they rush through the turnstile for their bus, and you know, it's like people are so crammed full of stuff, and they're just doing so much, and they're so busy, and they're so concerned about what's going on in their lives that even if they're together, they're really alone. So this is expressed in this poem, Who is Alone? I left the subway midst machine gun fire of turnstiles, letting prisoners through to crowded freedom. But despite the throng with shoulders touching mine, I was alone. with what determined looks they pushed along. Some weighty problems they must solve today, but being old and very cynical of foolish hopes, I smiled. I was alone. Here all around me where I live in peace, they build new homes, and when I take a stroll alone along the walks, the workers pause to say hello to me, and I am not alone. Laughter of children comes from snowy hills, and sled tracks through the woods make my heart glad. Forgive me, serious friends, for selfish thoughts. Somehow I cannot feel alone today. So what he's saying is, in the busyness of life, we are so focused on what we have to do and getting on time to these appointments and these responsibilities that we have to take care of, that we're pushed against each other, almost like we're in a bus and there was no place to stand up, but we had to stand up. You know, and hitting up against each other and rubbing shoulders against each other. And then for a single person who's not involved with anybody, that can be a very lonesome, alone experience. You know, you can be more alone in the city than in any other kind of life because there are people around you, but you don't know who they are. You don't have relationships with them. So he gets off that trolley thought and gets to being where he's at home, where he's taking a walk, where he talks with people who are building houses, where he's hearing children laugh, and life is so much better, the quality of life is so much better, and then he's saying he's not alone anymore. He has all of the goodness around him of the people that he knows. So I can understand what he's saying. Then here's one called ecology. The forces that control my life are quite environmental, and my parental heritage I judge as incidental. So if I strive with all my might amid the right conditions, the chances are that I'll achieve my personal ambitions. I will do what I can to achieve what I need to achieve. And because of my heritage, because of my attitude, because I'm striving with all of my might, I'm going to do what it is that I want to do. Let's see. I'm going to read this. I'm going to skip a couple here, but I'm going to read perfection. Perfection I must strive to reach, no matter how or where, but who is wise enough to tell when I am really there? And I've said before, goals are individual. What your goals are is maybe not what somebody else's goals are. Now, the last poem I'll read from him is called Exodus, and the reason I want to read it is that he's talking about his upcoming death. And it is true, when you stop to think of it, the people who are least afraid of death are usually the oldest people. They think of it as being kind of a release. Younger people are more concerned about dying and preparing for it than older people who are closer to it. This is what some research studies show. But this is a poem that he wrote, and he's calling it Exodus. If you sing songs for me, make them slow and harmonious, not rapid and discordant, for I have no time to waste on the rattle and rant of the boasters or the egotist or the exhibitionist. I have a few years, perhaps, to listen to songs of love and devotion, of hearts that vibrate in harmony, to heal those wounds that hate has caused. There, over the door, shines out the exit sign. Sing me a song of peace and hopefulness as I pass through the door. In other words, I have a certain amount of time left. I don't know how long it's going to be. And I want to live a peaceable life. I don't want a lot of drama. Now, I have found this to be true with people who are elderly. They're tired of the drama. All of these arguments between people, they have no meaning to the elderly person who, just wants to live in peace. So that gives you an idea of who he is as an 82-year-old. His creative processes are good. There's no reason that he doesn't have good creative processes, and he wants a simple lifestyle, and he doesn't want to be hassled by the things that people are hassled with all the time. He's seeking a peaceful life. And he wants to have his friends, and he wants to have the important people around him, but he doesn't want to get involved in the drama that we all get involved with. I know that that as you get older, you want to do good creative things, but you don't want to be hassled by little itty-bitty arguments, because to you they have no meaning. You don't know how much time you have longer to live, so live it peaceably and have some joy in your life. So now we've got a little bit of time left, not a lot, but a little bit of time left. And I'm going to start the personality and the physical process of aging. So supposing you're 65 years old, or maybe even older, people do change, and the body does change, and you do have a difference in the way that your body handles things. But remember, the ages blend into each other. Remember that there's no separate personality of old age. The personality that you have when you're older is basically the same as the personality that you've had when you were younger. It doesn't change. You may become more rigid, but the personality structures are about the same. Now, it says, the scientists will tell you that your basic personality is laid down by about age 5. And there is something called the concept of the eternal self. And I may as well kind of get into it now and close with it, because we're basically out of time. But the concept of the eternal self is that you feel like you, no matter what age. If you think back to when you were younger, you still feel like you. I feel like me the same as I felt like me when I was 10 or 11 years old. The basic personality gets laid down at quite an early age, around 5 years old, but the personality traits don't change much, and you are basically the same person when you're 85 and 90 as it was when you were 10 or 11, because your basic personality stays the same. There is no such thing as a separate personality of old age. And if you think back, you don't feel any different. You are you. You feel like you, whoever that is, and you've always felt like you. And when you were younger, you felt the same way, because the personality tends to be stable. That's called the concept of the eternal self, where you feel the same as you used to feel about yourself because of the traits that you have. They're permanent. Now, people do change, they grow, they become more mature, but there are certain basic personality patterns that you have that are probably the same as you've always had. So the only change in elderly years is that you may become more rigid, you may not become as flexible in your thinking, but you can fight against that. If you're active, if you're busy, if you're doing things, you're going to see all kinds of changes that people have, and you're going to be able to accept those changes. Even if they're not for you, you can accept that people feel a certain way and still respect them. But your own changes, your own personality is still going to be the same as it was when you were younger. Well, we're about out of time, so I guess I'll close it here, and we'll get into the process of aging, the physical process of aging, and the emotional process of aging the next time around. So please join me then.